The Geekom MegaMini G1 is the world's first water tool. I'm sorry. I can't do the Batman voice that long. This little PC that Geekom sent over to me to test out is wild. They're calling it the first water-cooled mini PC. So I, of course, went searching for water-cooled mini PC. I'm finding some like mini ITX builds that have water cooling, but not a true mini PC. What is that? The GT Box Tank Mini. This is wild. This looks air-cooled though. So I'm gonna go with that. The MegaMini G1 really does look like the first water-cooled mini PC. Some of you already know this, but I've fallen down the mini PC rabbit hole over the last few weeks. But don't worry, found the bottom. Wait, there's more. What these mini PCs are doing is that they're taking laptop components and shoving them into the smallest form factors that they possibly can. And I've sincerely been blown away by the kind of performance you can get out of one of these little things lately. And I really shouldn't be. The Steam Deck, the ROG Ally, they're basically doing the same thing, just in a gaming handheld form factor. I tested out this little $170 B-Link PC a few weeks back, and I was just beside myself by how well it handled everything I threw at it. I wasn't throwing that much at it. I was using Clip Studio, I was using Krita, Blender kind of, but I was not rendering in Blender, just kind of putting things together, even some modest games. So what if you take those laptop components and you just spec the hell out of them? You get this. The configuration that they sent over to me has a 13th gen Core i9 processor. You could also get an i7 if you want to go with the lower end version, an NVIDIA RTX 4060 GPU, 64 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM, and 2 terabytes of M.2 storage. There is a second configuration, like a lower configuration, that costs a little bit less, but it's still keeping that RTX 4060, which is really, I think, the star of the show here. They're also reducing the storage down to 1 terabyte, going with an i7 processor instead. This is a prototype. I definitely want to put that label on it. It is not available to the public yet. They do have a Kickstarter running right now, though, through early October, and they have discounts for people who pre-order early. But the biggest performance problem that you run into on any laptop or any mini PC is how are you going to dissipate heat? Systems get too hot, then they thermal throttle, and that ends up slowing down your processor's clock speed in order to just basically cool down the computer overall. And when that happens, you lose a ton of performance. And once you add a GPU to a laptop or a mini PC, you're adding a lot more heat to a tiny little enclosure. I tested out the Asus ProArt PX13 just a few weeks ago, and that's using the new AMD chip, which is great. I loved it. It also had a 4060 enclosed, and under any load at all, like boot up any game and boom, those fans are just blasting the entire time that you're using it. When I started taking online art courses, I quickly found myself way in over my head. It was like jumping from elementary school straight into college. I needed something that was in between that. My Learn to Draw in 60 Days course is that middle step that goes over the basics of drawing so you can jump into more advanced tutorials and courses with confidence. To learn more about that course and my other ones, go to bradsartschool.com. Now, I've only used a few mini PCs, but in general, they're much better when it comes to fan noise, but they almost never have a dedicated GPU. In fact, this is the first mini PC I have seen with a dedicated GPU. You can see inside the enclosure, there's actually room for air to circulate. And of course, this giant fan, you never see a fan this size. In fact, this is a desktop caliber fan, sized fan in here. It's pushing a lot of air and it's doing it without making a ton of noise. Now, you could definitely hear this PC. Whenever it's on, I hear like a low fan buzz, so it is not silent. It might not be the fan though that's making that noise, because I have fans this size in my PC that make no noise. They're silent when they're running at low speeds. It might be the motor on the pump that I'm hearing. That might be what's making that little hum. And when this thing really gets going and has to push a lot of air, that fan is running fast, you definitely can hear it. So like I said, this is a prototype, so when I first got it out of the box to set it up, it just has raw Windows on it. There's no drivers for anything. So most pre-built PCs and laptops do come with some software already installed from the manufacturer, and a lot of that software controls the hardware. So there was nothing on this PC to control, say, the RGB lights or the fan speed. So the fans, when I first turned this thing on, they were just running at full speed through the entire Windows setup process. It was really loud in this room. And they are still working on the drivers. They sent me the drivers that they have, and they're completely in Chinese right now, but that was at least enough to let me get the fan speed down. It's quiet now. You can't hear it running. What I really wanted to do is I wanted to build like a fan curve. And so I tried some apps to do that. I tried MSI, Afterburner. I found one called Fan Control. Neither one seemed to be able to control the fan in this PC at all. These are probably looking for fan ports on a motherboard. That's my guess anyway. Anyway, English drivers should be on their way. So this is not a like long-term problem. Once we get out of the prototyping phase, you should be okay. This is also the same case with the RGB on the device. English software is coming out, not here yet. All right, so let's take a look at the I/O because we do need to cover that. There's a lot of ports on this. On mini PCs, this is the sort of thing that can be hit or miss. Even when you get into like that $600 range, that's when the ports start to get pretty good. This has the kind of I/O I would expect from a full-size PC. We have 4 USB Type-A ports right here along the front. We also have a headphone jack there. We get an SD card slot along the side. I did not expect that. On the back, we have 2 HDMI ports. We have 2 USB Type-C ports. Those ports are also Thunderbolt and display out. We have 2 more USB Type-A ports. We have an Oculink port. I have never seen one of these things in the wild. I've heard of them. It's basically a way to connect an external GPU to a computer like this if you have a dock for it. It already has a 4060 in it, so I don't know how many people are actually going to use that. Maybe in the future, if your GPU gets older and you just want to upgrade it without upgrading your entire PC. It was really the dedicated GPU that really drew my interest for this. That and the form factor is kind of unique. If you want to use a mini PC for art and illustration, it's fine, and I've demonstrated that in videos before, but if you want to use it for rendering in Blender or gaming or anything that's going to need that external GPU for that kind of performance, that's where the mini PCs really fall behind, or at least don't go up to the level that you might really want them to. So in order to test this out, I whipped up a little Blender test. This little animation has 120 frames. It's 4 seconds long. It's rendered out in cycles. It's rendering out at like a 1080p image. And on my RTX 4080 desktop here, it took about 12 minutes to render out this entire thing. So I was expecting the 4060 to take longer. It ended up taking about a half hour to render. This is definitely an imperfect test for a couple reasons, but this did give me a chance to see how the computer would perform with the GPU going at about 100% for an extended period of time. Now, the lack of drivers and being able to set a really nice fan curve on this really takes away from this test quite a lot. I set the fans to just 50%, just blow the whole time, just do your thing. About 10 minutes into the test, the temperature was bouncing around in the low 50s. It was really low. By the end of the half hour of rendering, it was in the mid 60s. That's nothing. So once these drivers are complete and you could really kind of min-max this thing, you're going to get a lot more out of the 4060 here. I bet you can get that time down. But out of the box, that's the kind of performance I was getting. And I was seeing the same thing with games, you know, with no optimization at all. I was going in, right now I'm playing Star Wars Outlaws. I love it. I was getting around 100 frames per second at 1080p with settings on high, buttery smooth, really good. I think it looks phenomenal. I ended up bumping the resolution up to 1440p. At these high settings, that was still bouncing between 50, 70 frames per second, depending on what I was doing, where I was in the game. Since my test monitor here only goes up to 60 hertz, because all of my monitors are drawing tablets, and most drawing tablets only go to 60 hertz, that's all I really needed anyway. The GPU was close to full utilization. After a half hour of play, it was holding steady around 70 degrees. Now, one thing I did find is that once the temperature does get up into that realm, the body of this thing is like an aluminum. It's heavy metal, it's encased all around, and it is really hot to the touch. This thing is holding a lot of heat in it. So even at 70 degrees, if it's airing out okay and it's performing well from the GPU standpoint, you don't really want to rest your hand on it. I didn't test too many games, but I thought, let's do it. Let's boot up Cyberpunk and see what was going on. It was looking pretty good. That too, I'm running at 1440p, frame rate, outside in the city, driving around the open world, holding steady around 60-ish frames. Those settings were on high. There was plenty of opportunity for me to knock those down a little bit and get way more frames if I needed them. So what are the downsides of the MegaMini G1? I think the biggest one here is price. This thing is starting at $1,600. After the Kickstarter, it's gonna be $1,700, and that's for the lower end model. The higher end model, I think, is going for like 200 more. Hold on, I should actually look this up. $1,800 for the high end model on the Kickstarter, $1,900 if you wait. One of the main benefits of a mini PC is that they do tend to be pretty cheap. This is floating in the area of a high-end laptop. You could also build yourself a really, really good custom PC at that price. If you want like the best performance per dollar, this probably isn't your best bet. And nowadays you can make some really cool PCs in a small form factor. Not this small though. Search YouTube for mini ATX build. It's another rabbit hole, but it's a super fun rabbit hole. Now there's some super cute 4060 compact desktop builds out there. Even if you're going with a bit bigger case, you could go up to like an RTX 4070 easily in one of those and still come out at this price point. That's also going to give you all of the customizability that you get when you build your own PC. So going forward into the future, you can upgrade anything you want. Here, you're kind of stuck with what you got. I did not open this thing up. I'm just going to go with the assumption that, yeah, I can't upgrade it. Also, there's liquid involved and I'm scared. We have been seeing manufacturers making PCs that are basically PCs in a console form factor. That's what this feels like to me. We have the ROG Nuke, however that's pronounced. That thing actually has worse specs, worse airflow for pretty much the same price. I love building PCs. I have only done two, kind of an expensive hobby. The first one I built is right behind me here. And just a few months back, I used the Fractal Terra case to make a cute little living room PC. I love how this thing looks. It's so cool. Months later, I still love it. I will say that building in a smaller case is a lot harder than building in like a normal size case, especially if you've never built a PC before. I would not start with a smaller case. The cable management I did on mine is shockingly bad, and I don't even care as long as the thing closes. The power supply I picked up for that build totally fits, but they make smaller versions. The reason I went with this one is because one, it fit, but two, people were saying, hey, the fans are really silent. And on the smaller ones, you should get the fans smaller. They get a little bit louder. Because of the way the cables come down, you kind of need that space underneath the power supply to make everything fit. If I had gone with a smaller one, I would have been able to fit the intake fan that I picked up on the bottom there. Right now, there's no airflow being sucked in down there. There's still some other fans doing that, but it could be way better. Maybe sometime in the future, I'll pick up a smaller power supply and put that in there. We'll see, I don't know. But for now, it works fine for the kind of gaming I want to do. But this is all to say, if you really don't want to build a PC, and I know a lot of artists and illustrators out there don't want to dive that deep into the details, something like this might be a good option. If you want something really tiny for your space, this might be a good option. It's a little bit smaller than, say, like an Xbox Series X. It has about the same footprint, but it's not quite as tall. It looks way better in person than it does in photos, and I can't even control the RGB yet. The one thing that might give you pause are the drivers in the software. Even though they're working on them, I always say until something exists, it doesn't exist. Don't buy the new Surface Pro with the ARM processor until Adobe has completely finished making ARM versions of all their software. They say they're working on it, but they've said that for years, right? It's one of those things that you should not bank on something existing until it is there, until it is tested. Of course, if you do want to wait, it means you're going to miss out on the discount, unfortunately. But I'm sure in a few months, when we're out of the prototyping stage and everything is done, people are going to have their hands on this, and that's going to give you a better idea of how customizable this thing is from the software standpoint. But man, I love me some quirky form factors. I love when a company says, we can do something that's never been done before. Even if this form factor doesn't make a lot of sense for some people, I think there's going to be folks out there who really love this thing. And if that's you, this is a solid PC with really good performance, and you're probably going to enjoy using it. I know I did. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.